Hey, welcome to Saved and Besieged by Flippin' Tables. This is a place where faith meets the fight, and your permission to be brutally honest about your pain without letting go of Jesus. This is a space for the burned, the bruised, and the barely hanging on. No sugarcoating, no shallow faith, just raw hope, real theology, and a God who refuses to walk out when life gets ugly. Saved and Besieged by Flippin' Tables, for the wrecked, the raw, and the rising. Hey, this is Cece.
And I'm JR.
Together we're JRCC. Our mission is simple, to bring you one podcast at a time about faith.
Not the polished, sugar-coated version, but real faith.
The kind that wrestles doubts, cries out, and still finds Jesus in the mess.
That's what Saved and Besieged is all about.
Welcome to Saved and Besieged. So we live in a world that's constantly trying to convince us that we should be in control. Control of our lives, our work, our relationships, and even our own happiness. Every ad, every Instagram post, every life hack seems to scream, take control, make it happen, be the boss of your own identity. But here's the hard truth. We are not in control. We never have been and never will be. There's only so much that we can control. And if you're anything like me, that realization is a little frustrating. If you're a planner, a doer, a checklist girl, someone who likes to have things in order, this can feel like a punch in the gut. We want to hold the reins, drive the car, know what's coming next. But the reality is, life is filled with uncertainties that no amount of planning or control can smooth out. The pandemic was a clear example of this. Who could have ever planned for that or predicted the chaos, the fear, and the absolute disruption it caused in every aspect of life? The truth is, we can't control the outcome or the inputs in life. We can't control the world around us, how people behave, or even some of the things that happen to us. But here's where we find a real turning point in our faith. We can control where we focus. We have the power to decide what we take from God, whether it's peace, clarity, or purpose, and how we use it. Think back to the last time you felt overwhelmed, like everything was coming to you all at once. The chaos was relentless. The news cycle was heavy. Maybe your job felt like a never-ending treadmill. It's easy to feel like you're at the mercy of everything around you and that the world has a tight grip on your mind and soul. But you can shift your focus. You can choose where your mind goes in those moments, even when life is loud and chaotic. So going back to the pandemic example, we were constantly bombarded with reports of rising numbers, fears, and an ever-changing world. I don't know about you, but I found myself constantly checking my phone, trying to keep up, trying to be informed. But here's the thing. The more I focused on those stimuli and the outside news, the more I felt a creeping sense of anxiety, frustration, and helplessness. In a time where I needed to be clear-minded, focused, and centered on God's mission for my life, I realized that I was losing my peace to the very thing that I was trying to keep up with. Just like we can control how much we let the world's chaos influence us, we can also choose what we focus on: peace, clarity, and purpose. God's control room is less about managing every outcome and more about choosing the right focus when everything else feels out of control. Let's take a look at Paul. Here's a man by all accounts who should have been overwhelmed with frustration and doubt. He was in prison. Prison, that's a pretty tough place to be, especially in those days. He was chained, isolated, and facing a future that was uncertain. If anyone had the excuse to be focused on resistance and their suffering, it was Paul. But that's not what he did. In Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 to 14, Paul writes, "What happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel." This man was literally chained in a prison cell, and yet he found a way to focus not on his chains, not on the resistance, but on the results, which was the advancement of the gospel. That's mind-blowing. I would have been consumed by that circumstance. But Paul chose to shift his focus. He chose to see beyond the chains and look at the mission. And because of that, he could still find peace, clarity, and purpose in the midst of everything. His focus wasn't on his struggle. It was on the opportunity that came with it. Paul saw the big picture. He knew that despite his circumstances, God was still at work. The gospel was still advancing, and that was his focus. So you may not control your circumstance, but you can choose how you see them. You can focus on what God's doing, even when you can't see the full picture. And the key to peace and clarity and to purpose is not controlling everything around us, but in choosing to focus on the right things. And the truth again is, we're not in control. but God is. And the question we need to ask ourselves is this: where is my focus right now? Are you focusing on the storm around you or on the peace that God offers in the middle of it? Are you focusing on the resistance or on the results of your faith and obedience? You're not in control of the storm, but you are in control of where you look. And this doesn't mean that suddenly life's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that those difficulties will go away. But it does mean that your heart and mind can remain anchored in God's peace. No matter the chaos around you, it means you can live with a sense of purpose, even in the toughest circumstances, just like Paul did. And it means you can walk through life knowing that while you may not control everything, God's in control. And He's got a plan that's bigger than what you can see in this moment. So stay tuned for the next bit where we talk about the power of the right question. Ever questioned if God still hears you? You're not alone. This is Saved and Besieged with JRCC. Let's get back into it. Welcome back. You're listening to Saved and Besieged with JRCC. And we've just talked about God's control room and focusing on the right things. How about talking about focusing on the right questions? Do you ever find yourself asking the wrong questions? I'm not talking about big life questions like what's my purpose or what's next. I'm talking about the little ones that sneak in when we're vulnerable, insecure, or overwhelmed. Questions that can either fuel or completely derail us. They can keep us on track or lead us straight into a spiral of doubt and negativity. We all know how easy it is to fall into the trap of the wrong questions. It's like one tiny thought can set off an avalanche of insecurities. You walk into a meeting or a room and someone looks at you funny, or maybe they don't respond the way you expected, and suddenly your brain's racing and the question you're asking is, what's wrong with me? Instead of saying, what does this person need from me, or how can I help? Right there, you've opened the door to every negative voice and insecurity from your past. What's wrong with me? Invites every doubt, every failed relationship, every criticism, and they all come flooding in. It becomes a game of what am I doing wrong? When in reality, nothing is wrong. But that question and that focus drags up all your fears and past failures, and suddenly you're drowning in them because you're too focused to see the big picture. And the funny thing is, when we ask the wrong questions, we end up wasting so much time on things that don't even matter, the things that distract us from our purpose and focus. And we let those little distractions take over our lives. Paul was sitting in prison, and he could have easily asked, what's wrong with me? He was locked up, facing a future that was uncertain, his ministry that was now uncertain, and he was at a crossroads. But instead of asking the wrong questions, he asked the right one. Why does all this matter? Let that sink in for a second. Paul wasn't concerned about himself. He wasn't asking, why is this happening to me? Or what did I do wrong? Or what's wrong with me? He was asking, what does it matter? And in doing so, he shifted his focus completely. He chose to focus on the big picture. What does it matter if I'm in prison? What matters is the gospel is still being preached. And let's get real for a minute, because the wrong question can derail you. How often do we find ourselves asking those wrong questions when things aren't going the way we want? Social media, for example. It's easy to start comparing yourself to others when you scroll through a feed full of perfect families, dream jobs, vacations, and suddenly the question becomes, what's wrong with me? Why can't I make it? Remember, that's a trap. The problem isn't you. The problem is how you're seeing yourself in comparison to others. You don't know what's happening behind the scenes of someone's life. You see a beautiful car that someone's standing beside, but you don't know the number of mortgage payments that they've got, or the payments on the car that they've got that's drowning them in debt. What you're seeing is a highlight reel, not the full story. But asking the wrong questions can make you feel less than, like somehow you're falling behind, like you're missing out on something everybody around you seems to have. That's a lie. Because if you don't shift your focus and don't challenge the questions that come into your head, it can wreck your peace, your joy, and even your confidence. And then there are moments of miscommunication. You know, when you're talking to someone and they look at you funny, you feel the shift in energy and suddenly the wrong questions creeps in. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset with me? Am I being judged? And you haven't even figured out what's going on. We've all done this. We waste so much energy on assumptions and we fill in the blanks with our own insecurities. And this is where the concept of deciding your distractions come in. We have to decide what gets our focus. Not every disruption in your day is a distraction. Not every negative look or harsh word is something you need to waste your emotional energy on. And not every opinion matters. When we let the wrong questions and distractions take up space in our minds, we lose sight of our true purpose. Because we get to decide what we focus on. Is it our peace of mind? Is it our purpose? Or is it someone's highlight reel? And this is where the question, why does it matter, becomes so powerful. It's not about being insensitive or uncaring. It's about prioritizing. When you step back and ask yourself what really matters in this moment, then everything else starts to fade in the background. Because remember, God's goal isn't to impress people, but to connect them to Him. In the end, God's goal for your life isn't for you to impress anyone or to have all the answers or to be the loudest voice in the room. It's not to win every argument or have your opinion heard above all others. God's goal for you is to connect people to Him. And that's it. Your life, your work, your struggles, they all tie to the greater mission of pointing people to the grace and truth of Christ. So the right question here is, why does it matter? Because when you're focused on God's mission, on His calling, everything else fades away. Because you're not impressing people, you're not winning them over with your own strength. And even if you don't win them over, who cares? Because everything is secondary. You don't need to have everything figured out. And the challenge is not to let the wrong questions take control of your thoughts. Because it's so easy to let garbage thoughts into our head and just let everything come in. It's about asking the right questions to recalibrate your focus. So the next time you feel overwhelmed or distracted, ask yourself, what is the purpose in my life? Don't let the wrong questions hijack your peace. Stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking, what does God want to do through me? And decide your distractions. Because remember, God isn't calling you to impress anyone. He's calling you to connect people through your words, your life, your actions, and your focus. So stay tuned for the next bit, where we talk about purpose over pity. Take a breath. You're listening to Saved and Besieged by Flipping Tables, for the wrecked, the raw, and the rising. Let's step into the next part together. Hey, welcome back to Saved and Besieged with JRCC. Have you ever found yourself caught in the weeds, stuck on things in the grand scheme of things don't matter? The petty arguments, the small frustrations, the things people say or do that get under your skin. And before you know, you've spent so much emotional energy on something so trivial than you have on the things that actually matter. And I've done it as well. It's like you're giving your time and energy to things that don't add value, and it feels draining, unproductive, and even defeating. It's easy to fall into the trap. So take a simple analogy and let's make it real. Imagine a table in the middle of the room. Everyone in the room would want to argue about who put it there. Maybe one person says it was me, I set the table up. Another one claims, no, I put it there first. The debate can rage on. But the thing is, who put the table there is less important than why it's there. The purpose of the table is what matters, not about who set it up, because that's about bringing glory to them. But it's about the table's function, to serve, to hold, and provide space for people. And the same goes for your life. Who put you in your current situation? Who's responsible for your struggles? None of that matters. Yeah, it's tragic, whatever you're going through. But it doesn't matter as much as the purpose God has placed on your life. Whether it's your job, your relationships, or your struggles, or your triumphs, focus on why you're here, not on who's responsible for getting you there. So if we look back at Paul, sitting in prison, having every reason to be caught up in the who questions and the blame, he could have spent his time focusing on Caesar, the corrupt political system, or his enemies who were actively plotting against him. But Paul didn't waste time on that. He focused on the purpose and the why. He was in prison, yes, but he was there for one reason, for the gospel. In Philippians 1, verse 16, Paul writes, I'm put here for the defense of the gospel. He wasn't consumed by the bitterness of the people or the systems that put him there. He didn't waste his energy on what's wrong with the world narrative. Instead, he flipped it. He focused on the purpose of his imprisonment, to reach people. And even in that prison cell, he found ways to advance God's mission. What if we did the same? What if we stopped focusing on who or what or why our struggles exist and started focusing on why we're in those struggles? What if every challenge, every setback, every frustrating moment became an opportunity to ask, what can I learn from this? Or how can God use me in this situation to help someone out of something similar? For Paul, it wasn't about who had locked him up. It wasn't about his suffering. It was about what was happening through him, despite his chains. Purpose over pity isn't just a nice chant. It's a mindset. And one of the most freeing things you can do is make an I don't care list. I'm serious. This isn't about being apathetic. It's about getting real with yourself and realizing what's truly worth your time and energy. There's so many things in this world that can pull you away from your purpose. Social media, noise, gossip, the opinions of people who don't even matter in the grand scheme of your life. People's drama, you can name it. Let me ask you something. How much of your emotional energy do you waste on things that don't matter? How many times do you find yourself frustrated or upset over things you can't control? It's so easy to get caught up in the small stuff, to argue, to get defensive and prove yourself and your worth, or to waste time on things that don't really contribute to your growth or purpose. But that's how we get sidetracked, distracted by things that don't matter. What if we could take all that wasted energy and redirect it towards something meaningful, something that moves you forward? Making an I don't care list isn't about being indifferent to people's issues or their lives. It's about choosing what really matters and letting go of everything else. It's about deciding that some battles just aren't worth fighting. Some opinions aren't even worth entertaining. And some distractions aren't worth your time. Just think about, does it really serve your purpose? And care about the things that do. Decide how you're going to invest your time and emotions and let go of the rest. So stay tuned for the next bit where we talk about real life applications. How do you choose purpose over distraction? Sometimes faith hurts, sometimes it heals. Most days it's both. This is Saved and Besieged. Let's keep going. Hey, welcome back. This is JRCC and you're listening to Saved and Besieged. Let's take this a step further with a real life application. A lot of us, especially in today's hyper-connected world, find ourselves consumed by the 24 hours news cycle or scrolling through social media, not because it's productive, but because it's distracting. You might think you're just keeping up with things, but all of that is just pulling your focus away from the big picture. And let's face it, it's exhausting. What if you limited your exposure to social media, not out of ignorance, but to protect your peace and your mind and your focus? Imagine reclaiming that time. Focus on things that align with your calling, deepening relationships, growing in your faith, because God needs you to be focused on His mission in your life. And then there's the concept of choosing relationships over winning an argument. It's easy to get caught up in the small stuff in relationships, the petty disagreements, the little things that irritate you. But when you realize your calling is more important than your need to win, everything changes. Stop fighting for the sake of being right. Instead, fight for connection, for understanding, for love. Prioritize relationship over being right. And then the ultimate principle, you decide what matters to you. God wants set priorities for you. He's already given you the tools and purpose. And it's up to us to decide how we're going to focus on that. Because you got to remember, the enemy only has two tools, either discouragement or distraction. And life isn't just about what happens to us. It also is about how we choose to respond to what's happened. There's a difference between being discouraged and distracted, but both can take us out of the game. The enemy never comes to us head on, because sometimes he distracts us, sometimes he discourages us. But the goal is always the same. So stay tuned while we talk about the parallel between Paul and Elijah and how the isolation after big moments happened. Still with us? This is Saved and Besieged by Flippin' Tables. Faith in the middle of the fight. Let's dig deeper. Hey, welcome back. You're listening to Saved and Besieged with Flippin' Tables. And this is JRCC. Both Paul and Elijah faced monumental victories in their lives, but they also faced monumental defeat. And straight after their victories, they felt isolated and they were battling their own inner turmoil. What stands out, however, is their mindset. While they both faced isolation, their responses couldn't have been more different. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 9 to 13, we just see Elijah having seen God's miraculous power on Mount Carmel. But he's hiding in a cave now, feeling defeated and worthless. And he says to God, I've had enough, take my life. Just after he's called on fire from heaven, he's now in a cave wishing for death. And God looks at him at that moment and says, what are you doing here, Elijah? Now, God wasn't asking Elijah why he was physically hiding or condemning him for running. He was asking Elijah why he was mentally and emotionally hiding from his calling. Elijah had just seen the power of God at work, but in his mind, he felt like everything was pointless. The discouragement set in. He'd forgotten the victories. Now contrast that with Paul and Philippians 1 verses 12 to 18. He sees his prison as an opportunity, and he finds it a place of purpose. His perspective is not on the resistance, but on the result. Paul chose to see his circumstances as a part of God's bigger plan, while Elijah got lost in his own thoughts and fears. But here's the beauty. God didn't discourage Elijah or condemn him for his thoughts. He still brought him out so he could see and focus on the right things. And discouragement can make you forget your past victories. Distraction, on the other hand, is a subtle threat, and it's a slow drain. It doesn't come like a rush of water. It doesn't knock you over. It's more like a drip, drip, drip that wears away at your resolve. Distractions often look harmless at first, and they usually do come after discouragement, because a few minutes on your phone, a quick scroll through social media, and before you know it, the minutes turn to hours, and you don't focus anymore on your purpose. Because distraction doesn't feel like it's taking anything from you, but it does. It steals your time, your peace, and your focus. And if you want to break free from the cycle of discouragement and distraction, you have to choose what you focus on. Like Paul, you can look at your situation through the lens of purpose. And like Elijah, focus on what God is trying to do through your circumstances. And it all comes to perspective. The enemy wants to distract you or discourage you. But God is using your situation to build you, to refine you, and push you closer to your purpose. When discouragement and distractions come, ask the right questions. What can God do through this? When distractions pull at your attention, decide on what to focus on. Focus on what matters, the things that move you forward in your faith and purpose. Because you are not powerless. Even in the middle of your storm, you have the power to choose where you focus. And that, my friend, makes all the difference. So the next time you're feeling discouraged, ask God, what has God done through my life so far? What has He done before? Remind yourself of past victories and how God has worked through your struggles. Don't let the present moment erase what God's already done. And when distractions pull at your focus, ask, what does God want me to focus on right now? And lastly, choose your perspective. Ask yourself, what can God do through this? Who can I help that's going through exactly the same as I am? If we look back at Paul again in prison, chained, alone, facing the unknown, in Philippians 1:20, Paul says, I'm eagerly expecting and hoping that in no ways will I be ashamed. Paul's focus wasn't on the chains. It wasn't on the people who'd put him there. His purpose never wavered, even when everything around him told him to quit. And here's the thing, purpose brings clarity. When we know what truly matters, we can stay focused on that goal. Even when distractions come at us from every angle. Think about these questions. Why does it matter? Because I often think about how we let other people's opinions dictate our lives. We get caught up in the cycle of worrying about what others think, whether we measure up, whether we fit in. The truth is, not everyone's opinion of you matters. But the way you view yourself, the way God sees you, and the way you look at your purpose and the way you were created, all of that matters. So ask yourself, why does it matter? Because some things in life can take up way too much emotional energy. But in the light of it all, does it really matter? The answer is a simple no. But the things that do matter, your peace, your joy, your relationship with God, those are the things that will carry you. Your purpose matters. The people you're called to love and serve matters. Your identity in Christ matters. And the truth is, you matter more than you know, more than you realize. Maybe you won't see the impact of your actions today. Maybe you won't see the results of your obedience tomorrow. But every step you take in purpose, every choice to focus on God over distractions, that matters. And it all adds up. It's not always about the big moments. It's about the little decisions, the everyday choices. Those add up. So decide now. Decide what matters to you. If you're constantly living in the emotional weight of the world's expectations, you lose sight of what is really important. Your peace, your joy, your focus, and those things matter, not the opinions of others, not what they think about your house, your car, your clothes, your relationship, your engagement ring, not the drama. None of that matters. Focus on your purpose. And when you're feeling lost or distracted, ask God for better questions. Ask, what does this matter? Shift your perspective. Shift your focus. Let go of the distractions. Embrace the peace He offers. You can choose where your focus goes. Ask God, what are you teaching me through this? How am I growing as a better person? And please don't let the enemy convince you otherwise, because you have a calling. You have a purpose. And when you keep your focus on Christ, when you ask the right questions and prioritize the things that matter, even in the midst of chaos, you will find peace, joy, and clarity. And the enemy will distract you and discourage you. And by God will the world do it as well. but God's purpose over you will always prevail. So stay tuned for next time where we go deeper into the real meaning of a relationship with God. Because remember, your relationship with God is between you and God, not between you, God, and anyone else. Thanks for listening. This has been Saved and Besieged with JRCC. And that's a wrap for this week's episode of Saved and Besieged by Flippin' Tables. Stay tuned. Next week, we'll dive even deeper into the trenches with a conversation you won't want to miss. We'll talk about the battles no one sees, the prayers that feel like they bounce off the ceiling, and why God's still in it with you, even when you're ready to tap out.
In the meantime, if you want to go even further, check out our books on faith, addiction and survival at flippintables.co.nz. They're raw, real and written for the wrecked, the raw and the rising.
Until then, keep fighting, keep trusting, and remember, Jesus never walks out when life gets ugly.